What's shaking, my beautiful listeners? I'm your soon-to-be re-elected President Donald J. Trump, who is absolutely not going to jail. Anyone saying so is spreading fake news around. Anyways, JJ Plagiarisms invited me onto his channel so I could give my own take on a show that is said to have symbolism that relates back to me, as stated by this actress on the show. I just finished watching all 12 episodes of the much liberalized Andor, a show about an illegal Mexican immigrant named Cassian Andor, a character featured in Rogue One. To no one's surprise, Andor was a boring failure. It's perhaps the best show you could watch if you feel like having a snoozy if you can't get to sleep. Despite being told this show was a metaphor for the Trumpian world, I found an empty void of a show that makes White House meetings look like wrestling on Monday Night Raw. As a former actor myself, I can say that Diego Luna, the guy who I'm going to check, has entered here legally because he probably didn't. Point is, he looks bored for having been here. He shows no personality, no charisma, and I can say firsthand that it's always a sign of a soulless show. Given this was distributed by the very woke peanuts known as Disney, this was obviously going to be a hard watch. I've seen the original 6 Star Wars films enough times where I can say that Andor looks nothing like Star Wars. It had the most effort put into it in terms of set design, but the sets are incredibly drab, dull, and lifeless. Where's the goddamn color? It's one of the least entertaining pieces of filth I ever had to watch. And the best way of discussing a garbage show is to look at the problem in detail. So the show starts in a super awkward way. It just has Andor walk in the rain. There's nothing to observe, and it's like the bathroom present in the White House. The bathroom is sterile and clean, but has nothing to it besides that. He goes into a bar and speaks to this lady whose haircut tells me she forgot to exit the 80s. There are these 2 guys, Dumb and Dumber, who badmouth Andor because they have to wait. Yeah, that's really the best they could come up with. These guys don't like Andor because the bar bitches decided to serve him first. Andor doesn't even go into the bar for anything important. He apparently is looking for his sister, who I presume jumped over the big, beautiful wall to enter our country illegally. You want to know something? This instigator for the plot goes nowhere. Aside from seeing his backstory and some flashbacks, nothing about his sister comes up ever again. Did the writers ever hear of a Chekhov's gun? When you put a firearm on the wall, you got to do something with it later. Otherwise, it's just filler, like the Twinkie I have as a snack during meetings. So Andor walks out of the bar, and the 2 idiots from earlier try to mug him for no reason. Andor does a back headbutt and kills the first guy. And the second guy pleads for his life, but finishing a job half done is never a good idea, so he shoots the dude and runs away. What I just summarized was pretty much how the story starts. The conflict essentially started because these 2 guys wanted money. Andor kills them for trying to take his drug money and runs away. A key reason why this show is so boring is because things take forever to happen. There's no sense of urgency ever, and by the time something happens, you're already asleep, despite your best efforts to stay awake. This show is as slow as Joe Biden is in his speeches. That old guy could stand to take more dementia pills. Upon returning home, Andor goes about his routine, in which he meets his mom, who does very little, and also drops out of the show for the longest time. And by the time she's back in the show, she's also died from boredom. Either that, or they couldn't afford to pay the actress to be in it more. I'll leave that for you to decide. So a bunch of hotel workers, comprising of this one dude that sort of looks like Tobey Maguire, team up in the most embarrassing outfits I've ever seen. Yeah, this reminds you of Star Wars, doesn't it? There's also this one guy eating noodles that are dyed blue, as if the showrunners think that if you unearthly food blue, that it'll automatically be science fiction. Incredibly lazy, but I can't say I'm surprised. The hotel workers, for some reason, put so much effort into catching Andor that they go on a raid on his hometown. We have this guy who is supposed to be the mentor or something, and he offers Andor a chance to escape and blah, blah, blah. That's another thing. Recalling the dialogue is impossible, because not only are the actors not thrilled to be there even for a fat paycheck, but the words spoken have so little meaning to it. This is a show that I see so many garbage wannabe smart guys think is art. The show has no flavor to it, yet I see hour-long videos talking about Andor's favorite color. Seriously, the only enjoyment anyone can get out of Andor is doing what I'm doing and ripping on it for giving me such a bore. So many people defend the fact that it puts you to sleep by saying that it can take its time to pace itself out or something. What I just summarized of the plot took 3 long episodes to play out. 3 fucking episodes. I have no idea how anyone thinks the show should be as slow and boring as it is. Again, there's a lack of urgency. It's a show that drags on, with characters talking about random bullshit that has little connection to each other. We see that the Tobey Maguire lookalike has his own story in this show, and it's a pointless story where he meets his mother and he eats cereal that colored a weird way because these idiot showrunners think that changing the color of food automatically makes it feel like science fiction. I kept asking myself where the spectacle was, where the high stakes were, where the iconic quotable lines are, because Andor has none of that. Immediately after Andor gets off planet, he dicks around with a heist crew. None of the crew members have any interesting banter or chemistry, and actors must have hated themselves for agreeing to be in this show. We get an AK-47 in Star Wars, which shows how creatively bankrupt this show is. Like it takes an eternity for the heist to actually happen. And by then, I completely forgot what it is that they're supposed to be stealing. On top of that, we meet Mon Mothma, who just as stale as Hillary Clinton. I wondered what the hell the show was doing, devolving all these side plots into a show that's called Andor. There's no beginning, middle, or end. Andor and his bored associates do the heist, and then Andor kills a guy for a reason I couldn't be fucked remembering. And then he goes on a holiday. I'm starting to think why this is happening, because nobody makes a show this boring. Andor literally goes on a holiday, although he's arrested and sent to a prison where nothing happens at all. The people in prison just do boring jobs but eventually escape. But by the time it happens, you've stopped caring. Here's the thing about this show. Its boringness makes it impossible to care about what's going on. The story is incomprehensible, and it's no wonder they had to air episodes of this on television because nobody was watching it. It was that boring. Can someone please tell how Andor's story, Tobey Maguire's story, and Mon Mothma's story fit together thematically, or even in the barest fuck of relation to each other? It's like jumping from show to show where everything is very loosely connected. The show has no imagination to it. The rate of boredom many, including me, have with this show is so high, you have to wonder who this show is supposed to be for. Certainly not those who wanted a straight to the point, entertaining Star Wars show that complements the universe. Yeah, it's mostly Disney shills who like this boring-ass show. That's where the hour-long videos come from. People who watch this show more than I want to know, and someone managed to stay alive and somehow give this show raving reviews and treat everyone who was easily put to sleep by this boring show as below them. It's the same kind of mentality Last Jedi fans have, where they cry foul and say that people just don't get the movie, and that they're offended by watching such a thought-provoking movie that challenged audiences, but people just didn't get it. Of course, those same people would fail a general Star Wars lore quiz. People who have clearly never watched the original films look at this homeless loser and get overexcited about this guy who doesn't resemble Luke Skywalker in the slightest. I've also noticed that both Andor and Last Jedi fans make presumptions on what we even think. For example, The Last Jedi is literally just Empire Strikes Back with shitty subversions thrown in that makes the story insulting to watch and questions one's intelligence. Yet Last Jedi fans assume that we ignore the fact that the movie is supposedly original and bold. It's not even close. Andor-ass clowns seem to have no idea why people criticize the show for being too slow and pass it off as having a lacking attention span, when really the show is objectively the most dull and lifeless show ever. The pacing was awful. The characters were forgettable, if you even remembered them to begin with, because let's be real, I couldn't tell you who this guy is in slightest, let alone give you his name. Rogue One had this problem too, where they do a terrible job setting up characters and you miss the line of dialogue where they give you their names. That's where I opted to give the Rogue One crew nicknames. Aside from Jyn Erso, I called Andor the illegal immigrant, Rook the pilot man, and I called this guy the Chinese ninja warrior, and I called his sidekick the Chinese drum player, because that's what he looks like if he wasn't a rebel. I also called K2SO the big black droid. Director Krennic, to me, was the Aussie tyrant. Giving these forgettable characters nicknames was way better than the names the movie actually gave them. In fact, since I have no idea who these characters' names are, let's give the Andor cast their own nicknames. You've already heard me call the hotel worker Tobey Maguire. So this character is Puerto Rican bitch. This guy is the fat bastard. This guy is Gollum Boring. Andor's mom is the bitch from Harry Potter. This guy is Bootstrap Bill, and so on. You get the point. Anyone who went through the effort of watching this show 50 times just so they could memorize the zero substance characters must have fucking hated themselves for sitting down to watch this show 50 times. Bottom line, Andor is perhaps one of the worst Star Wars shows from entertainment value alone. While it doesn't break any continuity, aside from having zero resemblance to anything Star Wars, I am happy to give this show a 0 out of 10. That's mostly because I forgot what even happened beyond the basics. The show could have told the same basic story in half the number of episodes. I'm being dead serious, so that's my review. Remember to vote for Donald J. Trump in 2024 if you're American, and until next time, we got to get the wall finished.
Under the mountain, a golden